In the sprawling suburban kingdom of 42 Maple Street, where garbage cans stood like mighty fortresses and garden hoses coiled like sleeping serpents, there lived a gray and white cat of legendary determination. Captain, for that was his name, earned through countless battles with dust bunnies and rogue shoelaces, possessed the kind of unwavering focus that would make a Navy SEAL weep with envy. His nemesis? One Doby Mick, a corpulent white rat whose girth rivaled that of a small hamster and whose cunning could shame Machiavelli himself. Doby Mick's snow-white fur gleamed like fresh cotton balls, and his beady black eyes sparkled with the kind of mischief that kept Captain awake at night, tail twitching with anticipation. The great kitchen caper. It was a Tuesday morning when Captain first spotted his quarry. Doby Mick had the sheer audacity to waddle across the kitchen linoleum like he owned the place. A stolen Cheerio clutched triumphantly in his tiny paws. "Not on my watch," Captain declared, his whiskers bristling with righteous indignation. The gray and white warrior launched himself from atop the refrigerator in what he was certain would be a legendary pounce. He sailed through the air with the grace of a furry missile, paws outstretched, eyes locked on target. Unfortunately, Doby Mick chose that precise moment to duck into a gap between the stove and counter that was exactly one captain width too narrow. Thunk! Captain's face met the stove with all the dignity of a wet sock hitting a window. As he slid down the appliance's surface, leaving tiny paw prints on the stainless steel, Doby Mick emerged on the other side, somehow having acquired a second Cheerio. The rat had the nerve to wink before disappearing behind the toaster. Operation Cardboard Fortress. Undeterred by his first defeat, Captain spent the following week constructing what he called the Ultimate Rat Trap 3000, a elaborate maze of cardboard boxes, toilet paper tubes, and strategically placed catnip, for motivation, naturally. The contraption sprawled across the living room like a feline fever dream, complete with multiple entry points, dead ends, and what Captain was convinced was an inescapable central chamber. He waited and waited. His tail twitched with anticipation as he crouched behind the couch, green eyes fixed on the maze's entrance. Finally, Doby Mick appeared, surveying the cardboard labyrinth with what appeared to be professional interest. The rat stroked his whiskers thoughtfully, then proceeded to climb over the entire structure, using Captain's carefully constructed walls as stepping stones. He paused at the highest point to perform what could only be described as a victory dance, before leaping onto the bookshelf and vanishing behind a copy of War and Peace. Captain stared at his demolished masterpiece. Doby Mick's route had caused a domino effect that left cardboard scattered like the dreams of a defeated general. The great outdoor ambush, convinced that he needed the element of surprise, Captain took the battle outside. He spent 3 days digging what he called strategic foxholes throughout the garden, camouflaging himself with leaves, dirt, and what he hoped was chocolate, but feared might be something else entirely. The plan was flawless. Doby Mick would emerge from his suspected hideout near the compost bin. Captain would spring from his concealment like a gray and white jack-in, the box, and victory would finally be his. What Captain hadn't counted on was Mrs. Henderson from next door, turning on her sprinkler system. The first jet of water caught him mid-pounce, sending him spinning through the air like a furry pinwheel. He landed in the petunias with a soggy splat, looking less like a fearsome predator and more like a drowned cotton ball with attitude. Through the cascade of water, he glimpsed Doby Mick sitting safely under a mushroom, apparently taking notes on a tiny waterproof notepad. The indoor obstacle course incident winter drove the battle indoors, where Captain constructed his most ambitious trap yet, a Rube Goldberg-esque obstacle course that would make Olympic gymnasts weep. Yarn stretched across doorways at precise angles, marbles strategically placed for maximum slip factor, and a series of books balanced to create a domino effect that would ultimately drop a laundry basket over his target. Captain tested the contraption 17 times. On the 18th test, it worked perfectly. On the 19th test, the one that mattered, when Doby Mick actually appeared, the rat simply walked under the yarn, being considerably shorter than Captain had calculated. stepped around the marbles with balletic grace, and somehow triggered the trap in reverse. Captain found himself buried under an avalanche of books, yarn, and one very surprised laundry basket, while Doby Mick sat nearby, apparently reading The Art of War with great interest. The technology phase, desperate times, called for desperate measures. Captain convinced the family's youngest human to help him set up a wildlife camera, actually a tablet propped up with books, to study his enemy's patterns. For 2 weeks, Captain analyzed the footage with the intensity of a CIA operative. He created charts, graphs, and what he was certain was a breakthrough pattern analysis showing Doby Mick's preferred routes, timing, and snack preferences. Armed with this intelligence, Captain set up his most sophisticated trap yet, a pressure-sensitive platform that would trigger a net drop, positioned exactly where his data predicted Doby Mick would be, at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. At 3:47 p.m. on Thursday, Captain crouched in position, muscles coiled like springs. At 3:46, he spotted movement. At 3:47 exactly, he pounced onto the pressure plate himself, triggering the net and becoming thoroughly entangled while Doby Mick watched from the safety of a nearby bookshelf, apparently taking more notes. The final confrontation. After months of defeats, Captain's gray and white fur had taken on a slightly manic quality, and his green eyes held the wild gleam of a cat who had seen too much. His whiskers twitched constantly now, and he'd developed a habit of muttering tactical plans under his breath. The final battle came on a rain-soaked evening in November. Captain had abandoned all pretense of elaborate traps and decided on a direct assault. He spotted Doby Mick in the hallway, apparently reading a tiny book titled 101 Ways to Outsmart Your Cat. "This ends now," Captain yowled, launching himself forward with every ounce of feline fury he possessed. What followed was a chase scene that would have made Hollywood directors weep with envy. Captain bounded off walls, slid around corners, and performed aerial maneuvers that defied several laws of physics. Doby Mick, for his part, demonstrated an agility that seemed impossible for a rat of his considerable girth, sliding under furniture, swinging from lamp cords, and at one point appearing to run briefly up a wall. The chase culminated in the kitchen, where Captain, in a final, desperate lunge, launched himself toward his nemesis with a battle cry that shattered 3 wine glasses and caused the neighbor's dog to howl in sympathy. Doby Mick, with timing that could only be described as supernatural, ducked into a gap in the baseboard that Captain was absolutely certain hadn't existed 5 seconds earlier. Captain's momentum carried him straight into the refrigerator door, which opened on impact, showering him with leftover Chinese takeout, 3 apples, and a very surprised block of cheese. As he sat there, covered in sweet and sour sauce and contemplating the meaning of existence, Doby Mick's head popped out of the baseboard gap. The rat was wearing what appeared to be a tiny graduation cap and holding a diploma that read, "Advanced Cat Evasion, Summa Cum Laude." The eternal vow Captain slowly extracted himself from the refrigerator debris, his gray and white fur now decorated with rice and what he hoped was orange sauce. His whiskers drooped with defeat, but his eyes, those determined green eyes, still burned with unquenchable fire. He looked up at the ceiling, then beyond it, toward the vast cosmos that had witnessed his epic struggle. Slowly, deliberately, he raised one paw toward the heavens, his claws extended in a gesture of defiant determination. "I'll get you someday," he declared, his voice echoing through the kitchen with the force of 1,000 frustrated felines. "Do you hear me, Doby Mick? Someday." From somewhere within the walls came the faint sound of tiny applause and what might have been a miniature champagne cork popping. Captain lowered his paw, straightened his whiskers, and began planning his next assault. After all, tomorrow was another day, and somewhere in this house, a big white rat was getting entirely too comfortable. The war was far from over.